All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. For everyone on Zoom, this is a hybrid event, so I've got people in the lobby here, and then for everyone on Zoom, we are monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourself. And then for everyone here in the lobby, if you have questions, just interrupt me. I don't mind at all. Actually, I like it because these programs are, it's a lot of information. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thanks everybody for attending today. We're going to be doing a very high level, I like to call this our 35,000 foot overview of the SBIR and STTR programs. If we were to do an in-depth overview, it would take probably several weeks, and that's why we have our accelerators. So this is just a very, very high level overview to introduce you to the programs and talk a little bit about what they are and why you should be interested in them. My name is Dana Catron. I have many different titles here at Arrowhead, but for the purposes of today, I am the SBIR Program Director. And so again, please interrupt me either via chat or unmute yourself or here in the audience if you have any questions. And we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so the purpose of today's workshop is, again, to provide a very high level overview of the SBIR STTR programs. So I'll be going over the programs a little bit. Also the proposal process, that's kind of the key component of if you're going to submit an SBIR, you are going to do it via a proposal. And then lastly, I'll provide an overview of the New Mexico FAST program here at Arrowhead Center and how we can help you submit a strong proposal. So the SBIR and STTR programs, what are they? SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR stands for the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs. We often call these sister programs. They're very, very similar, but there are some key differences that we will cover here in a little bit. And really, these programs were designed to help startups and small businesses transform their high-risk, high-impact technologies into marketable products and services that solve problems. So the end goal of these programs is commercializing a technology or product and getting it into the market. These goals are the goals of both programs. So to meet the federal R&D needs of the government by providing research dollars to small businesses. Number two is to increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federal R&D funding. Three, the government's very interested in stimulating technological innovation, and one of the best mechanisms to do this is through small businesses. Fourth, it's to foster and encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. And so we have a particular focus here at NMFAST on serving minorities, rural businesses, things like that. And then number five is specific to the STTR program, and that's really to foster technology transfer through cooperative R&D between small businesses and research institutions. And we will talk about what research institutions are here in a little bit. But before we get into all of that, the first thing to talk about is eligibility. So are you even eligible to apply to these programs? That's a really, really important factor, because if you're not eligible, you don't want to spend the 100+ hours it will take to apply. So in order to be eligible, you must be organized for profit with a place of business located in the US. This is really important. More than 50% must be owned and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent resident aliens of the United States. So that's critical. If you can't meet that, you are not eligible for these programs. You also must be a small business. Here in New Mexico, just about everybody we work with, there's no problem qualifying as a small business, because the definition by the SBA for small business is less than 500 employees. Another thing to keep in consideration, and again, this isn't a hard line, but the focus is performing R&D. So really consider that when you're thinking about these programs. These funding opportunities are not meant to purchase equipment or commercialize a technology that has already been developed or one that has very low risk and only needs capital. This funding is there to fund high risk, very, very early stage technologies, ones that would not be funded through things like venture funding yet because they're so early stage. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at these programs. Another really important factor is the technical challenge focus. So agencies who participate in the SBIR and STTR programs really want the business to solve a technical challenge with their innovation. So that's the first thing when you work with FAST, we try to identify what is that technical challenge that you would be looking at with this funding. If I could already go out and buy something, I would do that, right? That would not be something to use the funding for. So there needs to be a really compelling reason why this funding is the only path forward. And most of the time it's because it's so early stage, nobody else is going to fund it, right? And you don't have the capital to fund it yourself. Solving that technical challenge also allows you to look at other issues, like can the product be made better by doing X, or can you cut costs by doing Y? So these are things that kind of naturally fall in line when you start thinking about these programs. So getting into some of the specifics of the programs and why you should consider it. We always talk about these as the best and really one of the only sources of early stage capital for small businesses. Number one, it's equity-free investment in your company. You don't have to pay that money back, which is great. Number two, it allows you to demonstrate the feasibility of your idea. So again, there aren't a lot of funding mechanisms that will allow you to do that. Number three, it allows you to start building a team and building your company for success. So a huge component of putting these proposals together is a strong team. So we get you into that mindset very, very early on. Number four, it will help you provide due diligence for follow-on funding. And so we work with a lot of angel investors and venture capitalists, and they really like to see SBIR when somebody comes to them looking for investment, because that's the government has already invested in your technology. So somebody's already backing what you're doing. Number five, it allows you to map your product and value proposition to your intended customer. Commercialization and customers market, all of that was not as important 5 to 10 years ago as it is now in the phase one. Now, agencies really, really like to see you, and they require you to think about your commercialization plan and how are you going to get this into the market very early on. Number six, it reduces your need to self-fund your R&D, which can be very, very expensive. So this is a great mechanism to do that. Number seven is IP and data rights. We'll talk about that a little bit more in one of the next slides. And then number eight, this is probably one of the most important ones for me anyway, and it positions you for sole source government contracts. So once you get a phase one, you are positioned for sole source, and that's huge in the contracting world. So it's a really great benefit if you can get that phase one, and if government contracts are something you'd like to pursue. Government's purpose. So why do they even fund these programs? It builds a stronger economy for America. So the government recognizes that small businesses are the backbone of America. They account for 44% of US economic activity, which is huge. And the more businesses that succeed, that equates to more tax revenue, more job growth, et cetera. So they're very interested in supporting small businesses. It also helps to build a stronger innovation pipeline. So small businesses produce 16 times more patents per employee than large businesses. They also employ almost 40% of America's scientists and engineers. So a lot of the human capital is located in small businesses, and so it makes sense to fund them. So going into the programs a little bit more deeply. Again, SBIR and STTR are often considered sister programs. SBIR and STTR, I should say, they both support R&D and financing of innovative technologies. For SBIR, it's about a $3.8 billion annual set aside. And this comes from 3.2% of the extramural research budget for all agencies with a budget greater than 100 million per year. And so what that means is if an agency's budget falls between that $100 million mark, they do not have to participate in these programs anymore. And if an agency that is not participating currently, if their budget goes over that $100 million mark, they will be required to participate in these programs. Again, the STTR program, very, very similar to SBIR. We'll talk about the differences here in a little bit. Basically for STTR, it's 0.45% of the extramural research budget for agencies with a budget greater than 1 billion per year. So there are fewer agencies that participate in STTR, and that equates to about $518 million per year as the set aside for that program. Something to remember, the small business is always the applicant and awardee. So when we start talking about STTR and partnering with a research institution, the research institution will never be the applicant or the awardee. The small business is always the applicant and the awardee. And these two programs collectively equate to about 7,000 new awards every year. So it's a pretty big and robust program. So kind of going into some of the differences between the two. These are really critical. So if you're interested in STTR, pay attention, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have about this. But the first is the partnering requirement. This is the biggest difference between these two programs. In SBIR, you're permitted to partner. So you can, if you want to contract with somebody, you're allowed to do that, but you're not required to. With STTR, you have to partner with a research institution. And research institutions are institutions like universities, like national labs, entities like that. The PI, there are some differences as well. So for SBIR, the primary employment must be with the small business. So this gets a little tricky when people going after an SBIR say they want to partner with a university and work with the faculty. It gets a little bit tricky because that faculty member, if they are PI, has to be over 50% with the small business. In STTR, there's a little bit more flexibility. The PI may be employed by either the research institution partner or the small business. So if you are wanting to work with a university, a lab, we generally try to drive businesses towards STTR. It's a little bit easier. The work requirement, again, with SBIR, you can outsource up to 33% on a phase 1 and 50% on a phase 2. With STTR, you have to allocate at least 30% to that research institution partner. IP requirements, obviously with SBIR, if you're not working with anybody, you don't need an IP agreement with yourself. If you're working with a research institution, you must work on that IP agreement. And it must be signed prior to the award. So again, if that's something you're interested in, we suggest starting to have those conversations as soon as possible because it takes a while to work those out with those institutions. In terms of participating agencies, again, because the SBIR program only requires that $100 million research budget, 11 agencies, and it's actually 12 departments, we'll get into that in a little bit, participate in SBIR while only 5 participate in STTR. And the program size, we already talked about that. SBIR is much bigger than STTR. So with the participating agencies, all of the agencies you see are participating in SBIR. And then the ones in gray are your STTR. So those are the bigger ones, the DOD, DOE, HHS, which houses NIH, NASA, and NSF. So those are your primary STTR agencies. Again, they also participate in SBIR. And then the point of confusion with the Department of Commerce, there are 2 very separate and distinct SBIR programs under that. That's NIST and NOAA. So that's kind of confusing to some people too. We talk about 11 agencies, but really 12 different programs. But I'm about to confuse you even more because within the 12 different agencies or departments, they all have components or other institutes that also participate in SBIR. And so when we're thinking about like DoD has 14 distinct components that participate in the programs, which are very different. And they all have their particular way of doing of what they want in terms of requirements for the proposal. Air Force is the most drastic. They have a completely different process than any other agency. And so 14 for DoD. Under DHS, there are 7 different components. HHS has 24 NIH institutes, and then the bold ones at the bottom are the 3 other HHS agencies. So there's technically 4 under HHS, but then when you add in the 24 NIH institutes, it's quite a few. Under DOC, again, that's NIST and NOAA. Those are the 2. They're very separate SBIR programs. And then under DoD, there are 12 different components. And so this is why we created our, oh, and actually, I think there's one more. There's 8 under DOT. So one of the reasons why we created our FAST program several years ago is because this is really confusing. We talk about the SBIR and STTR programs as 1, maybe 2 programs, right? But when you break it out, there's a lot of different programs, and they all have different ways of how they want that proposal written, things like that. And so we're here to help you navigate that process. I'm not going to go over this slide in detail. We'll be sending these slides out after. It's more so you can reference back later. But we just provided the very general things that these agencies tend to fund. And again, this is not written in stone. A lot of these agencies, especially NSF, are very broad. And so there's a lot of different things that they fund. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. You'll have this after the presentation. But some differences, and again, this is important to note before you pursue this kind of funding. The proposal submission process, like I mentioned, is very different for each of those. And so navigating that can be really tricky. The requirements vary. So that can include the format and the layout, the page counts, the content expectations, the portal that you submit them through, when you're allowed to talk to their program managers, things like that. The funding levels vary. We'll have a slide here in a minute that shows the differences in funding levels. Periods of performance vary depending on agency. Solicitations also vary. So some may only have 1 solicitation per year, some up to 3. This solicitation guide on the right-hand side we have available on our website, and it's again a very high-level overview of when solicitations can be expected to open and close, so that if you are thinking about applying to maybe 2 or 3 different agencies, you can kind of time it a little bit better, and it gives you a high-level overview. So why pursue this funding? It's the government seed fund. You'll often hear it called America's Seed Fund. The government is essentially investing in an idea, in your idea. And so it's a great program to take advantage, again, if you have an early stage technology that you want to fund. The dollars are risk-free. We say that with a little bit of, quotation marks. There are some things tied to those dollars, but compared to things like a loan or venture funding, things like that, they're a lot less risky for the business. You don't have to pay the money back. You're not giving up any equity in your company, things like that. It's very similar to an established process of seeking third-party investment, right? So you do have to think about putting together a pitch. You need to know your product, the potential market, how is it going to be sold, things like that. And then again, we mentioned this earlier, but it does put you in a priority position for sole source sales to the government. So, and these are going to be your DoD, NASA, those types of agencies. And let's see, I'm going to answer a couple of questions on the Zoom really quick. So how quickly do they award after the window closes for submission? That also depends on the agency. So if you have a particular agency in mind, we can chat offline. But again, that's very, very dependent on the agency. And then yes, we will be sharing the PowerPoint after this. Another thing we like to bring up is grants versus contracts. So these are the two funding mechanisms that SBIR and STTR use to use these awards. So some agencies use grants, some use contracts. There's only one that uses both, that's HHS. But basically grants, they're going to be much less specific topics. So like NSF, they've got very broad areas that they fund. As long as you fit within one of those areas, they're interested in what you're doing, right? Compared to contracts, which is like your DoD, they're very interested in very specific things. And so when they put out their solicitations, they've got specific topics that they want solved. So they're going to say, we have this specific problem on this carrier. Can your technology solve that? And if your technology cannot fit within that topic, we do not recommend applying because you will not get the funding. It has to fit. With grants, it's very flexible compared to contracts because they're providing funds to support a public purpose versus grants or contracts, which are a binding agreement. So important to note that. In grants, the PI has a lot more freedom in defining the scope of work versus contracts, where the scope of work is usually pretty inflexible. And to that same note, you've got more flexibility in the use of funds with grants, whereas contracts, they're going to be, your payments are based on deliverables and milestones with more fiscal requirements. So they're a lot more stringent is kind of the takeaway for that. Grants require best efforts in research, while contracts require the delivery of promised goods. This is a big one for when you are putting your proposal package together. So with grants, the questions and answers about the solicitation are usually not made public. So those are between you and the agency, whereas contracts, the questions and answers about solicitations must be made public, and there are very specific times when you're allowed to talk to program managers. So that's something really important to remember too. And then going back to scope of work, with grants, you would define the scope of work. With contracts, the government's going to do that for you. And then this again, I don't think we really need to cover this. This is more so if you want to go back later, it shows the contract agencies versus the granting agencies. And then again, HHS is the only agency that does both. So kind of going, and again, I'm not going to go line by line. This is more as a reference point if you'd like to go back. But we put together this chart to kind of show you the phase 1 and phase 2 award amounts and the periods of performance for each agency. Again, this can vary because within, say, DoD, there's all of those different components. And so that's why we say up to. But generally for your phase 1, you're looking at anywhere from 100K up to about 250K for that phase 1. And then for phase 2 across all agencies, usually around 400K up to 1.6. We've seen them go up to 2 million. Again, it depends on the agency and the mechanism. You can also see that the periods of performance vary depending on the agency. And then that last column, we just added and it shows the total program funding. So you can get a sense of how big those agencies are. So DoD, clearly the biggest with 2.29 billion that they inject into these funds every year. Oops, okay, hold on, I've got another Zoom question really quick. Oh, that's from Dell, okay. So data rights and IP protection. I'm not going to get too much into this because we can get really into the weeds when we're talking about data rights and IP protection. If that's something you would like to talk to us about, we're happy to do that offline. The USPTO also holds regular webinars on this, but basically, regarding the SBIR and STTR programs and data rights and IP protection, you as a small business own and have full right and title to the data developed under an SBIR award. With STTR, again, it's a little bit different because you're working with a research institution. And so you have to negotiate and sign that IP agreement, identifying the sharing of data rights prior to the award. So that's something, again, if you're interested in STTR, we encourage you to start as soon as possible so that you can start working with that institution on that agreement. Years from the start of your award. So that's really important to know. And the SBC, so that's you, must mark SBIR technical data appropriately. Again, if you have more questions about this, Dell and I can talk to you about it more offline. This is really important to know too. So data rights only apply if you have not protected the technology before utilizing the programs to develop that technology. So something to consider if you've already started the protection process. And then also the federal government has limited use of the data. We don't see this very often. They usually, but they put it in because they do have use of it. Usually if they do use it, it's for the evaluation of the results of the award. And they do receive a royalty-free license to use that, whether it is patented or not. Again, we don't see this very often, and it's usually for evaluation purposes. If this is something you'd like to dive into more, the SBA has actually created some tutorials on it that are pretty comprehensive, and I've included the link in the slide. So once we send these out, you can go in and visit that if you have more questions. So getting into the program itself, we call the SBIR and STTRs a gated program. And the reason is you have to complete one phase to go on to the next. I'm going to preface that by saying there are some instances where you can go directly to a phase 2, but they are few and far between. And so generally we like to say it is very gated. You have to have a phase 1 to go to a phase 2. We also talk about what we call a phase 0. So that's kind of your proposal development stage. That's really where NMFAST, where I know there's a lot of people on Zoom that aren't in New Mexico. So other FAST sites, SBDCs, other organizations like that will help with the phase 0. We provide very comprehensive proposal development assistance, which I'll talk to you guys about in a little bit, and also microgrants. So there is some funding available at the phase 0 stage. The phase 1 is really your concept phase, right? So that's where you're developing that concept, that technology. The levels between 100 and 250K, between 6 to 12 months, usually for that period of performance. And these are very, very competitive programs. So there's about a 15% success rate of submission, which is low. The nice thing though is we like to encourage multiple submissions, because once you kind of get the hang of it, it gets much easier, and then we can help you get that award. So that's why it's great to work with us. Once you have your phase 1, you'll be eligible for phase 2. One thing about going from a phase 1 to phase 2, say you get a phase 1 with NSF, you don't have to get your phase 2 with NSF. If you see a phase 2 with a different agency that also fits what you're doing, you can go and get a phase 2 with any agency. So it is gated, but once you have that phase 1, there's a lot of flexibility with how you get that phase 2. The phase 2 is really for your prototype development. That's why the funding level is higher, as well as the period of performance. And the success rate is much higher because, again, it's only phase 1 awardees are applying for those phase 2s. Some of the agencies have second phase 2s, so this is where it gets a little complex. This is really your demonstration phase. So where you're developing that prototype, you're in the demonstration phase now, and then the goal is to get to phase 3, which is your commercial sales. Important to note, phase 3 is not funded by the SBIR program, and so we talk about phase 3 because, again, it is the end goal. The caveat is if your end goal and if your end customer is somebody like the DoD, they would fund you, but they would fund you via a different mechanism, not through their SBIR program. So again, kind of going back to the backbone of these programs, it's really innovation. What you're doing has to be innovative. One thing we like to talk about and stress when we're doing these presentations and when we're talking to clients is innovation doesn't necessarily mean high tech. These programs have funded low-tech processes, products that are considered innovative, but maybe aren't high-tech. And one of the really good examples we like to use is a business was funded to develop a process. It was basically a process of using comic book creation for PTSD patients. So again, not super high-tech, but the process hadn't been used before, and it was really of interest to HHS, so they funded that. It comes in all shapes and forms. So again, comic books, not what you would, typically consider high tech, but it was funded. And it can start anywhere in the product idea chain. So don't limit yourself because you think your technology or innovation is in a specific part of that idea chain. Commercialization, again, like I said before, the agencies are much more fixated on getting that commercialization plan, at least the gears going in that phase 1. Before it was more important the phase 2. Now it's very critical in the phase 1. They don't define how it needs to be commercialized, but it should have the potential to be commercializable. We don't know if that's an actual word, but we use it a lot. So does your innovation have that potential to become commercializable? And does it have a clear path to market, or do you have a strategy for how you're going to get there and how the funding will be used? So things like customer discovery activities that address the pain point, show gain, find the value statement. These are all things you need to kind of be considering while you're developing that phase 1. Some key questions to establish commercial viability. Again, we added this slide more recently because we see it so much in the phase 1s now. So these are just some things to start thinking about as you're developing it. It's pretty cut and dry commercial questions, but what's the demand and how has it been validated? So have you been talking to potential customers? Is anybody interested in what you're doing? Do people even need what you're developing? That's kind of a critical point, right? What's your market size? What are the involved economic factors? So is what you're developing a luxury or a necessity? That can be a really big deciding factor, things
Joe,
like that.
the meeting started at 12, not at 1, so I'm on it, but I'm calling you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Can you reliably reach your customer? What's the market saturation? Things like that. If you have questions about commercial viability, things like that, we encourage you to take advantage of things like accelerators. So Arrowhead, we run sprint accelerators, which really dive into all of these questions and make you go out and talk to your customers, things like that. I know a lot of programs across the country that do similar things that really go well if you're trying to put together a phase 1. Going into the proposal process, again, I'm gonna preface this by saying it's very dependent on the agency. So this is a very general overview. And if you're going to pursue this funding, you have to look at the specifics for that funding opportunity that you're going after. But generally, the first thing you would do is determine your eligibility. So are you even eligible to apply? Number one thing you want to do. We kind of talked about what those eligibility factors are in a previous slide. The second is you need to develop an innovative idea. So is what you're doing innovative, and will that qualify under these programs? So do you have an idea or technology that can respond to a specific need that the agency has? Again, that's more, this is more for DoD, those contracting agencies who have very, very specific needs. But even under granting agencies like NSF, they're going to have buckets that they're going to want to fund under. So making sure you align yourself with those funders. There are some registrations you must complete in order to apply. 3 in particular, so your Duns and Bradstreet or Duns, your System for Award Management or SAM, and then your SBA company registration. So regardless of which agency you go after, you have to have those 3 registrations. And so we encourage you to get those as soon as possible. And then we added number 4 because each agency has their own specific registrations that they want you to register for. So depending on the agency, you'll need to register for more. So again, talk to us soon so that we can point you in the right direction on what those are. And then you want to determine your topic fit and talk to the agency. So the solicitation, regardless of the agency, will have what their priority problems are, what they want to fund, things like that. So read the solicitation and then read it again, and then probably read it again, just so you have a really thorough understanding of what it is they're looking for and what it is you need to prepare. They're always going to be interested in solutions, even if it's not the approach that they want. And so they're very open to hearing about your solutions. And we've established over the last several years really great working relationships with all of the program managers at all of the agencies. And so if you want to talk to them, again, reach out to us and we can get you connected to those program managers. They're human, you know, they are tied to a federal agency, but they love to talk to small businesses about what they're doing. And that will give you a really good example of, you know, is what you're doing a fit with their programs. After you do all that, you're probably ready to start putting your proposal package together. Again, this differs depending on the agency. Some of them have even gotten rid of proposal packages. Some of them have requirements, like DOE requires a letter of intent before that you can even put together a proposal package. So again, research or talk to us about what those specifics are before you get started. But generally, you can expect to put some kind of technical proposal together, the narrative. You'll need resumes of your team, key personnel, PI, things like that. Facilities is usually big for these. Obviously, you will need a budget. And then again, for every agency, they will require additional documents depending on the agency. And then probably one of the most important things that we encourage businesses to do is to carry a third-party reviewer to review your proposal prior to the deadline. So give them time to review. We provide, again, funding to pay reviewers to review your proposals. We also review them in-house. And so several of our service providers actually review SBIR and STTR proposals for the agencies. So it's very advantageous to take advantage of that so that you can get that third-party review and they can identify any holes, gaps, things in your proposal. After you do that, you submit. We always say at least one day before. These platforms are notorious for getting overloaded the day the proposal is due and then crashing, and the agencies don't really care. If your proposal does not get turned in time, that's it. You're not getting it in for that solicitation, even if their platform is the one that crashes. So keep that in mind, submit early, and then you get to wait. Depending again on the agency, you can expect to wait anywhere from 3 to 6 months to hear back on if that proposal was awarded. This next slide is again a very general overview, timeline process of what you can expect if you decide to pursue this type of funding. And this was developed specifically for our program. This is kind of how we guide our clients through. Again, it depends on the agency because some agencies require additional things, and we do need to update this for agencies like NSF now, which require a project pitch, things like that. But generally, there are a lot of different steps involved in putting one of these proposal packages together. If it is your first time putting one of these together, we generally say at least 100 hours will be dedicated to putting together a compliant and strong proposal. So it's a commitment if you decide to do this. So if you do decide to do this and you live in New Mexico, New Mexico FAST can help. And again, for those of you who are not in New Mexico, the services we offer through FAST are very similar to services offered through other FAST sites in other states. So if you have questions on that, we're happy to connect you to the support organization in your state. But for New Mexico, what we provide to small businesses, again, at no cost, we are funded through the SBA to provide these services. We provide proposal development assistance that spans, it's very broad. Let me just put it that way. Whether you're brand new to these programs and need help identifying the topic, the agency, is your technology even innovative? We'll sit down and talk you through all of that, all the way up through submission. We do, again, like I said, proposal package reviews, either in-house or we can do it via our service providers. We do tailor our services for each client. So we offer very customized support for each client. Every client we have is at a different stage in development. Some may be brand new to the program. Some may have submitted several proposals and haven't been successful yet. So we determine how we're going to provide our assistance when we do our intake interview with you. Our micro grants, like I mentioned, are phase 0 funding, up to $2,000. And again, this funding is available. It's very broad to help with proposal development assistance. So if you need to talk to an accountant, we can provide funds to do that. If you want to go to a conference like the SBIR conference where you can go and talk to program managers in person, we can fund that. We'll fund reviews, things like that. So it's a sliding scale of up to $2,000 for that phase 0. We offer free workshops and engagement activities like this one today throughout the state so that we can do a lot of outreach and introduce businesses to these programs. This is considered an SBIR 101, again, 35,000 foot overview, but we also do much more specific workshops. So for example, Dell will be doing one specific to NIH in about a week or two. So be on the lookout for those. We've developed a ton of tools and resources that are available on our website. And if we have time at the end, I'll show you what those look like. But the link is also provided here. Those are things like proposal templates, compliance matrices, checklists, all of those kinds of things to help you develop that proposal package. We also have a monthly newsletter where we blast out all of the opening and closing solicitations for all of the agencies, any upcoming events, things like that. We encourage you to sign up for that. We have a very robust YouTube library of videos on SBIR. I always, again, preface this by saying they're pretty dry. SBIR can be pretty dry, but we've tried to break them up into small chunks so that if you're working at 3 a.m. in the morning and we're most likely asleep, although Dell and I are usually up at 3 a.m., you have a resource to go to get some questions answered. One of the things we started a few years ago, which we're really excited about, are multi-week SBIR and STTR accelerators. I'll be talking about that in a minute, so I won't go into too much detail on that. Along with our annual SBIR STTR Innovation Summit, I'll also talk about that in a minute. And then one of the newer things that we're integrating that we're really excited about is a learning management system through Canvas, integration of our SBIR STTR curriculum. So that's if you want to do a more self-paced study through these programs instead of our accelerators, which are incredibly intense. Our living library and website, again, I won't go into too much detail on this, but we've developed many resources for putting these proposals together. Again, our YouTube channel, I think we actually need to update this. We have over 141 videos, but we have quite a few videos on SBIR. We also have very handy playlists. So if you're interested in a particular agency, we've collated all of the videos tied to that agency into a playlist for you. SBIR Accelerator, like I mentioned, if you are interested in putting together a proposal package, we highly encourage you to sign up for our SBIR accelerators. We run several of these per year. We have 2 tracks. So our SBIR 101 track is a little bit shorter. It's about 6 weeks long, and it just goes through the programs in much more depth than, say, this workshop. And by the end of it, you should have a very good idea of which agency you want to apply to, things like that. Our agency-focused ACSAs are very intense. You can expect to be spending a lot of time. It's a pretty big commitment to participate in one, but by the time you finish, and it's a 12-week long accelerator, you will be submitting a full proposal package. And you can come into the accelerator and not even have your registrations. So again, very intense, but within those 12 weeks, you're putting together that entire package. So in summary, what do? We do a lot of things, everything tied to SBIR. We assist in identifying the appropriate agency or agencies and topic areas for your innovation. And again, we work with you one-on-one to do that. We provide how-to information on how to do the registrations, how to submit, how to reach out to the program manager, all of those different things. We will guide you every step of the way through your proposal preparation process. So again, it's very, it's a commitment on your end to put one of these together, but we'll be there with you through all of the pain of that. Again, we've developed a robust suite of SBIR resources that anyone in any state has access to. So those are all housed on our website. And then we do reviews of proposal drafts, provide feedback, meet with you again as much as you need. And then again, we do offer those micro grants for that phase 0 funding. Really quick, I just want to end by talking about our upcoming New Mexico SBIR STTR Innovation Summit. We are holding this virtually again this year because of the unknowns with COVID, but it will be held December 15th from 8:30 to 4:30 Mountain Time. And it's going to be a full day of panels, presentations. One of the best things to take advantage of with this event is the ability to have one-on-one meetings with program managers. So we have several agencies who will be participating this year who will have one-on-ones available, so you can go and actually talk to them. We'll also have lots of different booths from other support organizations like PTAC, who can help with contracting, the national labs, with the agencies themselves. So it's a great event to take advantage of. Registration is free, and the link is on the slide. So again, when we send this out, you can access that, and I'll also include it in the email. And with that is the end of our very, again, high level SBIR presentation. We're happy to answer any questions. And then if you have more, if this is something you're interested in, I encourage you to reach out to us so we can schedule an offline meeting to really go through your specific technology and interest in the program. So are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah, and so again, we would talk to them to figure out more about what they're doing. But the Department of Ed is a really great example. They have an SBIR program, and a lot of what they fund is curriculum development. And then what kind of a lot of different ag projects. Yeah, so the USDA has a really great program. We actually just wrapped a USDA specific accelerator. And so if ag is something you're interested in, definitely talk to us. We'd be happy to both.
I have somewhat tangential question.
Sure.
Have you all seen any SBIRs that require DCAA compliant auditing systems?
Yes. So DCAA is something that we don't include in our 101 presentation because it's more specific for once you get that phase 2 for agencies like DoD. But DCAA compliance is very critical. You will need a DCAA.
Well, I am in the program. No, I'm in the right one.
Another question?
Let me see. How can I ask the question?
And let me go through some of these Zoom questions really quick. So Janice, yes, you can get help with a project pitch. We're happy to do that. For Elizabeth, no, there is no charge for our SBIR Accelerator. So we work really hard to ensure that we have funding to cover all of that so that we don't have to charge our businesses.
Okay. How I make contact.
We can hear you if you want to answer or ask.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't. Oh, so I am developing a product pitch, And I'm following the recommendations that they want to see that before you submit any, I've never approached NSF. And I wanted to see if I could get assistance. I sort of developed an outline, which I incorporated the guidelines, but I think it would be in my best interest to have somebody take a look at it. And I just thought maybe if I could shoot it over, that would be great.
Definitely. And then we'll be holding a NSF specific accelerator next May, starting next May. So if that's something you're interested in too, we will be holding one of those very intense 12-week.
Sure, I think that would be helpful. But as far as the product pitch, I think their next opportunity would be for a proposal would be this coming up soon, maybe December. I believe.
Yeah, so NSF is one of those. They decided to change up their program quite a bit. So they have a rolling deadline. They don't have specific. They've got I believe it's 2 or 3 windows per year where you can submit. The caveat to that is you must have an accepted project pitch first before you're invited to submit the full proposal. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I would need assistance with that. So if you would let me know how to start that process, I am working on it, almost finished.
Yeah, just email me. My email is up on the slide right now.
All right.
And then I'll be emailing everybody who registered for this webinar and workshop. So you'll have my contact information that way as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And one
thing, yep.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, are there any specific details and information required for application to the NMFAST SBIR training seminars that you'll have?
No, so all of that information is available on our website. And again, we run several cohorts per year. The ones we have coming up next year, we'll be doing an SBIR 101 cohort, an NSF cohort, and then very likely DOD and NIH cohorts as well. And so I would say the best way to keep up to date is to sign up for our newsletter, where we'll announce that and with the application link and everything.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This information was invaluable. Thanks so much for walking through it.
Sure.
For New Mexico companies, and beyond what you shared, any best practices and further recommendations in terms of what you see for folks that have put together super competitive or awarded proposals for phase 1?
Sure. So one of the biggest things, and it's, we laugh about it, but it's really critical, is reading the instructions. It's the #1 reason proposals will be thrown out, is somebody went 11 pages when the page limit was 10, or they didn't format correctly, or things like that. So #1 is just turn in a compliant proposal package. And again, that's why we've developed all of these resources, to make sure you can double and triple check everything before you submit, to make sure you at least won't get thrown out for a technicality. Other things is really making sure you're aligned with the agency, right? So make sure that what you're proposing is something they would want to fund. And another thing is talking to them. This is something that not enough people take advantage of, because it can be really intimidating to reach out to a federal program manager, right? But they want to talk to you. They want to, talk about what you're doing. And so they can give you a very, very good idea of, is what you're proposing fundable? And if it's not, they often say, well, maybe if you tweak it and think about doing this, you can go ahead and make those pivots and submit a more, a stronger proposal package. So, yeah. But again, happy to sit down and talk more.
One other question.
Yeah.
I did see last year that in lieu of COVID, there was some flexibility on the side in terms of some of the traditional times when you could submit. And it seemed like they had some open windows that if you submitted to do it, related. That's still the case, or they're going to return back to normal?
I think they're starting to return back more to norm. So NIH is back on their regular solicitation schedule. If you look at our solicitation card, and actually we've got some in the back, those need to be updated, but it gives you an idea of when those windows are. And then again, if you look at our social media, I would say social media is a really great place. Stephanie posts multiple times a week. Whenever an agency changes anything, it goes straight to our social media channels and we blast that out. So that's a really great source of the most up-to-date information. And then monthly, on the first of every month, we send out that newsletter with any changes, any updates to all of the agencies. Yep. Any other questions?
I
Okay.
have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have other examples of different companies that have gone through your program, or are you able to share?
Sure. And actually, is Dell still on? He might be a better person. He just finished up again that USDA cohort. So Dell Mackey, I think he's on here, runs all of our accelerator cohorts. So he is the one that you would be working one-on-one with. But we do, and one of the things I would say too, and this is not to discourage anybody from applying, you probably won't get the funding on your first try. It's very rare. These are very competitive, and it kind of takes going through the pain of that process to regroup and then submit a really strong proposal. So it's very, very rare for us to see somebody get it on their first try. But that's why we're there, so that on your second and third try, you can submit stronger proposals. And we do see clients winning awards, after multiple attempts. And that's very, very normal across the board with if you ask any support organization. But Dal, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I got a couple of minutes before I have to hop off for a call, but as far as the typical, kind of companies we work with, they really run the gamut of what are they developing, how far along are they. We've had clients that are, those home garage types. We have clients that have had prior awards and are trying to approach a new agency. And as Dana said, each agency is vastly different. So even for awardees for like DOE, when they switch to someone like NASA, it can be a very hard switch for them to kind of get around and figure out what they need to develop. We've worked with educational technology people, people that are developing new ways. A great example is to use hemp for insulation and siding for energy resilience and farmsteads, things like that. We really don't discriminate. Whatever you're developing, as long as we can see some fit for innovation within the programs, we can definitely provide that assistance for how do I put together this proposal package? What do I need to focus on? How do I need to actually make this a visually complete and story to tell throughout my proposal? And that really resonates well with agencies.
Right. And then to kind of add to that, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about the agencies, but you can apply to more than one agency for the same project. You just would not be able to get funding for the same project. And we really encourage businesses to think about agencies you may not typically think of. So a really good example of this is maybe you're working on a medical device or something in the medical field. So obviously HHS is going to be the first agency you think of. But agencies like DOD also are very, very interested in medical. When you think about it, they are the war fighter, right? But they also have cities on the water. They have cities in other countries, right? And so they have needs that span across all sectors, all industries. It's not just weapons development, things like that. And so try not to box yourself in terms of thinking that you belong to a specific agency. You can probably fit within multiple agencies. So any other questions?
Yes, it's Janice again. On the DOD, hi there. I was under the impression you have to, before you can approach them, you have to receive the phase 1 award. Is that not true still?
What do you mean by approach them?
or to submit a proposal, I believe you have to be a phase one successful applicant before they will look. I think they receive, you have to be in phase two. That's what I thought was true.
For the sole source,
Huh? I'm sorry?
are you talking about for the sole sourcing?
Yes, let's say I
Yeah.
want to apply to DOD, but my impression is they're not going to look at my app solicitation unless I had a successful phase one project, even from
Mm.
another agency.
Right, so
when
you would do your
mentioned-
phase one, yep, so you would apply for your phase one, get the phase one. The sole sourcing wouldn't happen until you have a product and you're more in that commercialization phase anyway. And so it's typically after your phase two that they would be talking to you about sole sourcing. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
But you can talk to them during the phase one, and actually a lot of companies do that, and the DoD will steer them into SBIR to go that route for sole sourcing. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. Well, it's 1 o'clock. This workshop was recorded, so we'll send out the link to that as well. You can refer back to it. Everyone will be sent the slides. And then again, if you have any questions and want to chat offline, my contact information is on the slides, and it'll also be in the email. So thank you, everybody.
Thank
you.
you.